Good day, everybody. Today, our three-dimensional lesson, is a slab assignment. This is basically using a rolled out piece of clay to create a three-dimensional art form. In this case, what we're going to do is create a potato sack. Looks very similar to potato sack. It has the texture of a potato sack. It sits kind of like a sack of potatoes would sit. We use burlap texturing on it, and we also use construction techniques such as scoring and the use of slip, pinching the ends together to make sure they sit real well, and then we just kind of manipulate the piece. So to create the slab, you actually need a piece of probably about a 1 pound piece of clay. The first thing I'm going to show you here is I roll out for everybody. I roll out a rather thick slab on the slab roller. You don't need to take part in any of this. I just wanted to show you what the machine looks like, and there it is. That is actually bigger than a 1 pound piece of clay. That's probably about 2 pounds, but I can make two projects out of that. So anyway, I basically put a cover over the slab roller and roll it out, and I get a pretty nice consistent thickness on my slab of clay. Okay, so there it is. I'm just going to move it over to the board that I'll be working on, and then I'll start constructing my potato sack. Okay, so here we are with a piece of clay. I have a board, and then I have all my clay tools, and I'll go through these clay tools as we work through this. But basically I have these 2 sticks, and they are probably about, I'd say 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch thick. And then I have a slab roller, and I am working on a piece of muslin. The reason I do that is because after you use the roller and use a board long enough, it'll get wet and then the clay will stick to it. So you need to make sure you do a couple of things to stop it from sticking. I needed to make that a little wider, so I actually rolled in the opposite direction there, side direction for a little bit. And then notice I flipped that clay over. You really need to do that. You're probably going to need to flip that clay over 2 or 3 times. If you continue rolling it without flipping it, when you're done, it'll stick to that board and it'll be really hard to get off. So you want to make sure that you actually do this, because it'll defeat the purpose if your slab is stuck to the board. Then, using the same sticks I used to create the same thickness, I'm going to use to trim my edges up. I want some nice clean edges when I pinch these 2 pieces together. And they are a pretty consistent slab to work with. I'm even going to trim the ends, the top and the bottom. Don't need an edge for that. Okay, so now I flipped it one more time, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of burlap. This is important to get the texture of the burlap on your potato sack. Okay, so now I'm going to take my roller, and I'm going to, with about medium pressure, I don't want to put so much pressure that it's flattening out and making inconsistencies in the thickness of the slab, but I still want to press it hard enough to where you're going to get that burlap texture. And when I pull it off, there's the texture. Now, one thing you got to make sure that you do is flip it over, because when we fold this over on itself, we want that burlap on the outside. And what we're looking at right now is the inside. Okay, we're looking at the inside of the potato sack. I still need to do a little bit more trimming. You can almost tell if it's going to be too long. If you get that too long, it's really going to be hard to bring it up on its end and then flatten it out. And right here, what I'm doing is I'm basically scoring. I'm marking the clay up. I can use a plastic fork. That's usually what I use, is a plastic fork, but in this case I just used a clay tool that was very similar to a plastic fork. And now I want to put some of my slip on, and I made this slip this morning. It's basically clay and water, and it's a consistency of cake batter. And then I just used an old beat up brush to apply the slip. You can use your finger as well. You want to make sure that you get slip the whole way down each edge. Okay, now this next part's kind of important too. I have this tool, and it's kind of got a knob on the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that tool right there about halfway down, and I'm going to fold the potato sack over on itself. And now you can see why we had the burlap face down, because now the burlap is on the outside. I'm going to pinch the seams together on both sides. And you want to pinch it pretty good, but you don't want to pinch it to where it's splitting apart. Okay, now I'm going to sit it up on its end, and what I'm going to start to do is just basically taking that tool and I'm wiggling it back and forth, and you can see what's happening to the clay at the bottom. It's starting to come out, and it's something that takes some patience. You can't expect it to happen just magically. You have to just, I call it bapping the inside of the pot. And you can see what's happening is it's starting to open up at the bottom. It's actually opening up at the top as well. And again, you're just taking your time with this. You really do need that tool that has a like a ball on the bottom of it. Now what I need to do is check my edges, make sure none of these seams are splitting apart. If they are, just pinch them together. And even if some of them do split a little bit later on, we can always fill them with clay as long as it's wet. I want to continue this process, and the important thing here too, guys, is that you make it wide enough to where it's going to stand on its own. If it can't stand on its own and it gets wobbly, when it's in the kiln it might fall over and wreck somebody else's piece. So we want to make sure that we get it wide enough. And then here's the fun part. I'm just basically dropping it very lightly, and you can see what's happening is it's flattening out on the bottom. I'm going to come back in here and knock the inside out a little bit more till I feel pretty comfortable with it. And then I'm going to pinch the top, because what I want to make it look like is that the burlap is really kind of thin, almost like burlap. So burlap usually isn't that thick, so I'm just taking my finger and thumb and I'm just pinching that top open a little bit. Now I'm going to bap it down a few more times. Now this time what I did is I actually tilted it a little bit, because I wanted to make it look like it's tilting backwards, and that way when we put the letters on and we put the stitching, you can see it really well. Again, this is only part one. What I'm going to do is, after we're done with this, is I'm going to let this set up for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to add some lettering and I'm going to add some stitching. So when I'm done here, which is going to be in the next couple minutes, that's only going to be part one. We still have another part to do. What I did there was I just simply put my fingers on the inside and I made a couple indentations, like there might be a actual potato sticking out there. And now if you look the whole way around, I'm just going to kind of give you a view of what it looks from the side, what the top looks like. You can see how I got it a little bit tilted. That's a good view of how I kind of, when I dropped it the one time, I dropped it at an angle, so it set kind of back. And there you have it. This is actually one that I did a little bit earlier, but it came out pretty good too. Notice the texture of the burlap. It came out pretty good. Now what I need to do, part two, is I'm going to put some stitching on the sides using an extruder, which is a clay tool. And I'm also going to use some lettering stamps to write the words potatoes. Hopefully I'll spell them right. Okay, have a good day. Hope you enjoyed it.